As I reflect on the past, our story began in the 70s when our parents immigrated from Brazil to the U.S. They forged close bonds with another couple who had also recently moved to Dallas, and our families became inseparable. Born just 4 days apart, my wife and I were practically raised together. Our families had no extended relatives in the U.S., so we became each other's family. We shared countless memories, vacations, weekend barbecues, and Sunday church visits. We were best friends, joined at the hip, as my mom used to say. Our connection deepened over the years, and we eventually discovered love together at the age of 13. It was a mature relationship given our age, but being best friends made the transition seamless. We continued our journey through college, got engaged in '94, and tied the knot in '95. Love unfolded beautifully as we welcomed our first daughter in '98, followed by two more daughters in 2000 and another in 2002. It felt like a dream, happiness, and contentment at its peak. However, the recent revelation about my wife's affair has shattered this idyllic picture. Learning about it when the other guy attempted to end his life added another layer of complexity to an already tumultuous situation. I used to read stories here and feel fortunate, thinking I'd never find myself in such a predicament. But life had other plans. I'm sharing this now, a bit drunk and emotional, so forgive any errors or if this seems incoherent. It's a painful process, and I'm grappling with a mix of emotions. I appreciate your understanding and support during this difficult time. The life we've built over the years seemed like a dream: comfortable living, multiple properties, and biannual vacations. Our intimate life was vibrant, exploring each other's kinks and expressing our love daily. It was an idyllic picture until this year when subtle changes began creeping in. I noticed her spending more time working, always on her phone. Intimacy waned, replaced by arguments over issues that never bothered us before. She became distant, and despite discussing it, attributing it to the stress of the year, something fell off. Even our daughters sensed the change. Last week marked the turning point when I couldn't deny that something was very wrong. Just 5 days ago, my brother-in-law's younger brother, 36, attempted to end his own life, a shocking revelation for everyone who knows him. It's puzzling because he didn't exhibit any signs of depression or distress, making it even more surprising. Given our close relationship with my brother-in-law's family, the news hit us hard. The incident was a close call, as he was found in his garage with the car running. Fortunately, they are optimistic about his recovery, expecting him to make a full recovery. What adds to the complexity of the situation is my wife's unusual behavior throughout this ordeal. She has been experiencing constant mood swings and has been visibly affected, crying all the time. While it's understandable that we are all saddened by what transpired, her reaction seems more intense than expected. 3 days ago, my brother-in-law revealed the shocking details of his brother's suicide attempt. It turns out my wife and his younger brother, who was 17 years my junior, had been involved in an affair for almost 11 months. The situation escalated last week when he tried to convince her to leave me, and in the aftermath, he attempted to end his own life. Confronting my wife with this revelation was a moment I never saw coming. I desperately hoped my brother-in-law was wrong, that this was some terrible misunderstanding. Yet, she confessed through tears, admitting to the affair and calling it a midlife crisis. She insisted there was nothing wrong with our relationship and that she still loved me. I accepted the revelation, and the emotions overwhelmed me to the point of nearly having a panic attack. I didn't know how to process everything, so in a moment of intense confusion and hurt, I packed a bag with some clothes and just stormed off. Driving away for 8 hours, finding myself in Memphis without a clear destination, was a desperate attempt to escape the turmoil that had consumed my world. I checked into a hotel, trying to distance myself from the chaos. But the constant buzzing of my phone betrayed the reality I was trying to escape. The news that my wife had shared our painful situation with our daughters only intensified the humiliation. I can't bring myself to respond to their desperate calls and messages, retreating into a shell of isolation. For the past 2 days, I've drowned my sorrows in 2 bottles of wine and a bottle of whiskey. The tears won't stop, and I feel utterly lost. The mere thought of my wife, someone I've known since she was just a day old, makes me sick to my stomach. We shared a lifetime, our first picture together when she was just 2 days old. Now, the foundation of that shared history feels shattered. What did I do wrong? It's a question that haunts me. I believed in us, in the life we built together. Now everything is unraveling, and I'm left grappling with an overwhelming sense of betrayal and confusion. The barrage of missed calls and unread messages only adds to the cacophony of my thoughts. I can't escape the pain, and I'm struggling to make sense of the road ahead. I made the decision to sober up and head back home on the 23rd. My mental state was far from stable. Knowing it wasn't safe for me to drive, I ended up hiring someone to take me back to Dallas. My sole focus upon arrival was to see my daughters and my dogs. I consciously avoided everyone else, craving the comfort of my family. I specifically asked my youngest, Emily, to let my wife know that I wasn't ready to see her. Unfortunately, she chose to stay with her parents during that period. To provide some context, my daughters have always been my shadows, especially the twins, Amanda and Amelia and Emily. However, Sarah, the oldest, had gradually distanced herself as she entered her late teens. Despite numerous attempts to bridge the gap, she kept me at arm's length, growing closer to her mother instead. Upon returning home, I immediately informed my daughters of my arrival and sought solace with my dogs. Soon after, they joined me, and the emotions overflowed. We talked for hours, tears were shed, and we embraced each other. The girls were genuinely shocked by their mother's actions, and our conversations took a turn into unpleasant territory as they voiced their discontent. The focus shifted to their mother, with them expressing their newfound perspective on her. It was a whirlwind of emotions, and they didn't hold back in sharing their disappointment. It was a bit overwhelming to witness my daughters processing the situation and grappling with their changing perceptions of their mother. It was a surreal experience hearing my daughters speak so critically about their mother, especially Sarah, who had always adored her. Under normal circumstances, I wouldn't have allowed such conversations about her, but the circumstances were far from normal. Despite the discomfort, we ordered dinner, shared a meal, and even managed to share some laughter. To cope with the overwhelming emotions, I decided to have a few drinks before heading to bed, perhaps a bit more than I should have. In the middle of the night, I was startled awake by Sarah. She explained that she was struggling to sleep and asked if she could share the bed with me. This request was surprising, considering she had been a sick child, diagnosed with leukemia at the age of 3. She had difficulty sleeping alone until almost 8, often finding comfort with her head on my chest. As she nestled beside me, it felt like a flashback to her childhood. However, the tranquility was short-lived. Sarah began crying on the verge of a panic attack, mumbling words in Portuguese, a family habit inherited from my parents. It became apparent that she was overwhelmed with guilt, expressing that it was all her fault and apologizing for what had happened. Eventually, the others woke up and I was able to calm Sarah down. As the night unfolded, the conversation resumed. It was a cathartic exchange where emotions ran high, and my daughters opened up about their perspectives, feelings, and the impact of recent events on their lives. The language might have been Portuguese, but the emotions were universal. It was a night of unexpected revelations and shared vulnerability, bringing us closer in our collective struggle to make sense of the situation. The night unfolded with a revelation that shook the foundation of my understanding. 7 months ago, Amelia discovered a painful truth when she returned home early one day. My wife and my brother-in-law's brother were engaged in an affair. The news quickly spread through our daughters, from Amelia to Amanda, then Emily, and finally Sarah. The sisters, bound by a shared inability to keep secrets, were burdened with this painful knowledge. Sarah confronted my wife, who, instead of admitting fault, offered a string of excuses. In the end, my wife made promises to Sarah, pledging to stop the affair and begging her not to disclose the truth to me. Despite the betrayal, Sarah managed to persuade her sisters to keep the secret, a heavy burden they carried with them. To compound matters, my wife's lack of discretion continued. 2 months after Amelia's discovery, Emily stumbled upon them in my wife's car, triggering the same cycle of pleas and promises. Once again, the girls kept silent, and the truth remained concealed. The emotional weight of these revelations became palpable as the girls, now united surrounded me, their tears and hugs creating an almost overwhelming atmosphere. As the pieces fell into place, I began to understand the potential motives behind my wife's actions. My parents had considerable wealth, while hers did not. Throughout our parenting journey, I tended to spoil our children, causing disagreements between my wife and me. Despite our past discussions on the matter, my wife went against our agreement this year. She gifted Sarah a new car in June and bought an apartment in Boston for the twins 2 months ago, both without consulting me. It wasn't about the money, it was about her unilaterally making decisions that went against our agreements. Fights ensued, but her excuse remained constant. 2020 had been a tough year for our daughters. I confronted my daughters, asking if their mother's sudden generosity was an attempt to buy their silence, to which they responded they did not want to hurt me. I lost my temper, and in a moment of frustration I harshly told my daughters to get out of the house. I packed my things, took my dogs, and drove to my ranch outside the city. I was far from sober, but somehow, against the odds, I made it safely. Alone in the midst of the holidays, I found an unlikely companion, my new best friend, a bottle of Blue Label. We bonded through the tears and the mess that was my life. The next 5 days were a blur of emotions, and I cried more than I thought possible. The only constant that kept me sane was the presence of my loyal dogs. Lost and unsure of what to do next, I kept asking myself what I wanted. The only answer that crossed my mind was visiting my parents. My mom passed away in 2013, a victim of a drunk driver, and my dad succumbed to lung cancer just 4 months later. I buried them in the city where they wanted to rest. Feeling the need to connect with them, I used my Brazilian citizenship, took a COVID test, which thankfully came back negative, bought a ticket, and 13 hours later, I arrived in Brazil. 8 hours after that, I reached the small city where my parents are buried, less than 20,000 inhabitants. On New Year's Eve, I spent the night drinking scotch with my parents. It was an unusual way to usher in the new year, and I could almost feel my dad's disappointment from beyond the grave, an unexpectedly eerie experience. I miss him. Amidst the chaos, my phone buzzed incessantly with calls and texts from everyone. Frustrated, I made a decision. I stopped recharging my phone. I needed a break from the constant stream of communication to process my thoughts and figure out what comes next. I went back to my city and contacted a divorce lawyer. I have also changed my will. I cannot live with the fact that my daughters knew and did not tell me. It took a few months and a lot of willpower to stay away from alcohol. I wanted to turn a new leaf in my life. My divorce was settled, and the whole family that I knew tried their best to stop the divorce and asked me to reconsider. I guess I tried harder than everyone else. I did not speak to my wife after that fateful night. No, even in our negotiations. My lawyers did all the talking. I have moved to a different city and have started working here. I cannot live in the same town as my previous family. My daughters call occasionally and apologize for their actions, but I change the topic. I have informed that after my passing, my inheritance goes to a charity, not them. They were upset, but they knew. There is no way I would listen to them. I still have my dogs with me. I guess that is the only source of unconditional love for me.